Hare Krishna devotees, because I'm a humble obeisance of Literature Prabhupada. Welcome devotees to our evening Bhagavad Gita circle reading program. Today we start a new chapter, chapter 8, and the chapter is entitled Attaining the Supreme. And we request devotees to really try to listen. And if we can ask a question, we can have a nice discussion or takeaway. That'll be really nice until and so that we can really understand this amazing, amazing chapter. Without further delay, we will start the class and the reading program. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Sunyavari Paschatyaji Shitarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shiva Shari Gaura Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Ram Ram Hare Hare. Good afternoon, dear devotees. Please accept our humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, which is entitled Attaining the Supreme, text 1. Arjuna Vacha Kim Tat Brahma Kim Adhyatmam Kim Karma Purushottama Adibhutam Cha Kim Proktam Abhidevam Kim Uchate. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Arjuna inquired, O my Lord, O Supreme Person, what is Brahman? What is the Self? What are fruitive activities? What is this material manifestation? And what are the demigods? Please explain this to me. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In this chapter, Lord Krishna answers different questions from Arjuna, beginning with what is Brahman. The Lord also explains karma, fruitive activities, devotional service and yoga principles, and the devotional service in its pure form. The Srimad Bhagavatam explains that the Supreme Absolute Truth is known as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. In addition, the living entity, the individual soul, is also called Brahman. Arjuna also inquires about Atma, which refers to the body, soul, and mind. According to the Vedic dictionary, Atma refers to the mind, soul, body, and senses also. Arjuna has addressed the Supreme Lord as Purushottam, the Supreme Person, which means that he was putting these questions not simply to a friend, but to the Supreme Person, knowing him to be the supreme authority, able to give definitive answers. Text 2. Adiyagya katam kotra dehesmin madhusudana Payana kale chakatam yeyosi niyatatmabi. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Who is the Lord of sacrifice? And how does he live in the body, O Madhusudan? And how can those engaged in devotional service know you at the time of death? Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Lord of sacrifice may refer to either Indra or Vishnu. Vishnu is the chief of the primal demigods, including Brahma and Shiva. And Indra is the chief of the administrative demigods. Both Indra and Vishnu are worshipped by yagya performances. But here Arjuna asks who is actually the Lord of yagya, sacrifice, and how the Lord is residing within the body of a living entity. Arjuna addresses the Lord as Madhusudan because Krishna once killed a demon named Madhu. Actually, these questions, which are of the nature of doubts, should not have arisen in the mind of Arjuna, because Arjuna is a Krishna conscious devotee. Therefore, these doubts are like demons. Since Krishna is so expert in killing demons, Arjuna here addresses him as Madhusudan so that Krishna might kill the demonic doubts that arise in Arjuna's mind. Now, the word prayana kali in this verse is very significant because whatever we do in life will be tested at the time of death. Arjuna is very anxious to know of those who are constantly engaged in Krishna consciousness. What should be their position at that final moment? At the time of death, all the bodily functions are disrupted and the mind is not in the proper condition. Thus, disturbed by the bodily situation, one may not be able to remember the Supreme Lord. Maharaj Kulashekara, a great devotee, prays, "My dear Lord, just now I'm quite healthy, and it is better that I die immediately so that the swan of my mind can seek entrance at the stem of your lotus feet." The metaphor is used because the swan, a bird of the water, takes pleasure in digging into the lotus flowers. Its sporting proclivity is to enter the lotus flower. Maharaj Kulashekara says to the Lord, "Now my mind is undisturbed and I'm quite healthy. If I die immediately thinking of your lotus feet, then I'm sure that my performance of the devotional service will become perfect. But if I have to wait for my natural death, then I do not know what will happen, because at that time, the bodily functions will be disrupted, my throat will be choked up, and I do not know whether I shall be able to chant your holy name. Better let me die immediately." Arjuna questions how a person can fix his mind on Krishna's lotus feet. Arjuna questions how a person can fix his mind on Krishna's lotus feet at such a time. Text 3. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Aksharam Brahma Paramam Swabhavo Vyatmam Uchete Uta Bhavod Bhavakaro Vishaga Karma Samgita. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "The indestructible, transcendental living entity is called Brahman, and his eternal nature is called the Adhyatma, the Self. Action pertaining to the development of the material bodies of the living entities is called karma, or fruitive activities." Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Brahman is indestructible and eternally existing, and his constitution is not changed at any time. But beyond Brahman, there is Parabrahman. Brahman refers to the living entity, and Parabrahman refers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The constitutional position of the living entity is different from the position he takes in the material world. In material consciousness, his nature is to try to be the Lord of matter. But in spiritual consciousness, Krishna consciousness, his position is to serve the Supreme. When the living entity is in material consciousness, he has to take on various bodies in the material world. That is called karma, or varied creation by the force of material consciousness. In Vedic literature, the living entity is called Jivatma and Brahman, but he is never called Para-Brahman. The living entity, Jivatma, takes different positions. Sometimes he merges into the dark material nature and identifies himself with matter. And sometimes he identifies himself with the superior spiritual nature. Therefore, he is called the Supreme Lord's marginal energy. According to his identification with material or spiritual nature, he receives a material or spiritual body. In material nature, he may take a body from any of the 8,400,000 species of life. But in spiritual nature, he has only one body. In material nature, he is manifested sometimes as a man, demigod, animal, beast, bird, etc., according to his karma. To attain material heavenly planets and enjoy their facilities, he sometimes performs sacrifices, yajna, but when his merit is exhausted, he returns to earth again in the form of a man. This process is called karma. In the Chandogya Upanishad describes the Vedic sacrificial process. On the sacrificial altar, 5 kinds of offerings are made into 5 kinds of fire. The 5 kinds of fire are conceived of as the heavenly planets, clouds, the earth, man, and woman. And the 5 kinds of sacrificial offerings are faith, the enjoyer on the moon, rains, grains, and semen. In the process of sacrifice, the living entity makes specific sacrifices to attain specific heavenly planets and consequently reaches them. When the merit of sacrifice is exhausted, the living entity descends to earth in the form of rain, then takes on the form of grains, and the grains are eaten by man and transformed into semen, which impregnates a woman, and thus the living entity once again attains the human form to perform sacrifice and so repeats the same cycle. In this way, the living entity perpetually comes and goes on the material path. The Krishna conscious person, however, avoids such sacrifices. He takes directly to Krishna consciousness and thereby prepares himself to return to Godhead. Impersonalist commentators on the Bhagavad Gita unreasonably assume that Brahman takes the form of Jiva in the material world, and to substantiate this, they refer to chapter 15, verse 7 of the Gita. But in this verse, the Lord also speaks of the living entity as an eternal fragment of myself. The fragment of God, the living entity, may fall down into the material world, but the Supreme Lord, Achyuta, never falls down. Therefore, this assumption that the Supreme Brahman assumes a form of Jiva is not acceptable. It is important to remember that in Vedic literature, Brahman, the living entity, is distinguished from Parabrahman, the Supreme Lord. Text 4. Adibhutam Ksharo Bhava Purushash Chadi Devatam Adiyagyoham Evatra Dehe Deha Vitam Vara. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. O best of the embodied beings, the physical nature, which is constantly changing, is called Adibhuta, the material manifestation. The universal form of the Lord, which includes all the demigods, like those of the sun and moon, is called Adideva. And I, the Supreme Lord, represented as Supersoul in the heart of every embodied being, am called Adiyagya, the Lord of Sacrifice. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The physical nature is constantly changing. Material bodies generally pass through 6 stages. They are born, they grow, they remain for some duration, they produce some byproducts, they dwindle, and then they vanish. This physical nature is called Adhibhuta. It is created at a certain point and will be annihilated at a certain point. The conception of the universal form of the Supreme Lord, which includes all the demigods and their different planets, is called Adidevata. And present in the body along with the individual soul is the Supersoul, a plenary expansion of Lord Krishna. The Supersoul is called Paramatma or Adiyagya and is situated in the heart. The word Eva is particularly important in the context of this verse because by this word, the Lord stresses that the Paramatma is not different from him. The Supersoul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, seated beside the individual soul, is the witness of the individual soul's activities and is the source of the soul's various types of consciousness. The Supersoul gives the individual soul an opportunity to act freely and witnesses his activities. The functions of all these different manifestations of the Supreme Lord automatically become clarified for the pure Krishna conscious devotee engaged in transcendental service to the Lord. The gigantic universal form of the Lord is called Adidevata. The gigantic universal form of the Lord called Adivevata is contemplated by the neophyte who cannot approach the Supreme Lord in his manifestation of Supersoul. The neophyte is advised to contemplate the universal form, or Virat Purusha, whose legs are considered the lower planets, whose eyes are considered the sun and moon, and whose head is considered the upper planetary system. Text 5. Antakale chamam evam smaran muktva kalevaram ya prayati samadbhavam yati nastyatra samshayam. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. And whoever at the end of his life quits his body remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this, there is no doubt. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In this verse, the importance of Krishna consciousness is stressed. Anyone who quits his body in Krishna consciousness is at once transferred to the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord is the purest of the pure. Therefore, anyone who is constantly Krishna conscious is also the purest of the pure. The word smaran, remembering, is important. Remembrance of Krishna is not possible for the impure soul who has not practiced Krishna consciousness in devotional service. Therefore, one should practice Krishna consciousness from the very beginning of life. If one wants to achieve success at the end of his life, the process of remembering Krishna is essential. Therefore, one should constantly, incessantly chant the Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Lord Chaitanya has advised that one be as tolerant as a tree. Taror pi sahishnuna. There may be so many there may be so many impediments for a person who is chanting Hare Krishna. Nonetheless, tolerating all these impediments, one should continue to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, so that at the end of one's life, one can have the full benefit of Krishna consciousness. Text 6. Yam yam vapi smaram bhavan tvajatyante kalevaram tam tam evaiti kanteya sada tat bhava bhavita. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The process of changing one's nature at the critical moment of death is here explained. A person who at the end of his life quits his body thinking of Krishna attains the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord. But it is not true that a person who is thinking of something other than Krishna attains the same transcendental state. This is a point we should note very carefully. How can one die in the proper state of mind? Maharaj Bharat, although a great personality, thought of a deer at the end of his life, and so in his next life, he was transferred into the body of a deer. Although as a deer, he remembered his past activities, he had to accept that animal body. Of course, one's thoughts during the course of one's life accumulate to influence one's thought at the moment of death. So this life creates one's next life. If in one's present life one lives in a mode of goodness and always thinks of Krishna, it is possible for one to remember Krishna at the end of one's life. That will help one be transferred to the transcendental nature of Krishna. If one is transcendently absorbed in Krishna's service, then his next body will be transcendental, spiritual, not material. Therefore, the chanting of the Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare is the best process for successfully changing one's state of being at the end of one's life. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you so much for reading this amazing verses, actually. As you were reading, I was I was thinking of Mother Gita, because I was trying to count the number of times Sri Prabhupada said Krishna consciousness, Mother Gita, and I lost track of count Mother Gita. But he mentioned it so many times, almost, I know, there are, many times in one purport, and it's just such a wonderful reminder by Sri Prabhupada that we have to be Krishna consciousness, and Mother Gita always brings that up. So thank you, Mother Gita, for having me be alert, although I lost count of how many times Sri Prabhupada mentioned that. Would like to ask devotees if you have any questions. Yes, Mother Gita, please go ahead, Mother.
Hare Krishna. Please
Hare
accept my humble obeisances,
Krishna.
August Prabhupada. Yes, it's so compassionate of Srila Prabhupada to remind us practically in every purport that we have to be conscious of Krishna. Prabhu, when you were reading verse number 3, it was it was a big jolt, because it reminded me where Prabhupada says that living entities, they first come as rain, then grains, so that should be a kind of a red flag for us, that we don't want to fall again as the rain and the grain, and to stop the cycle of birth and death. So that was a very, very powerful purport. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Yes, Srila Prabhupada explaining. It's a specific sacrifices some people make to attain specific heavenly planets. And you make the sacrifice, you will get there. Krishna is free choice, whatever you want to do. So if you know how to do the yagyas or mantras consistently to get to a heavenly planet, then you go to heavenly planet. But the heavenly planet, my Guru Maharaj says, it's like going on an extended vacation. He uses the word extended because you'll be there for a long time compared to this short life here on the earth. But vacation is vacation. It's not for life. It's over. And when it's over, you come back to where you started. You come back to your destination. And the destination you start, so if we make sacrifices in there from the earth to go to the heavenly planets, so you take your vacation there. And then you come back to this. And the process of coming back is what Mother Gita was repeating this year. Prabhupada says, we descend in the form of rain, and the rain falls, and the soul is in the grains, and then the grains are eaten by man and transformed into semen. And then when the man impregnates a woman, the act of sex life, then the living entity with a soul again takes human form to perform that sacrifice again. This is so you accumulated pious credits, and now you've enjoyed them, and you're back to square one. But a Krishna conscious person is not doing that. That's why a Krishna conscious person avoids sacrifices that would take us to the heavenly planets, sacrifices to the demigods. You avoid that. And not only that, but we think about Krishna, serve Krishna, and especially in Kali Yuga, we chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, which is repeated quite a few times in the text in the purports. Then we are putting ourselves in a situation to go back. Thank you very much for making that point for us. Hare Krishna.
That was a good point that Mother Gita mentioned too, because I was, as you were reading, that line that Mother Gita was addressing, that was sharing, like it's, imagining, souls coming back, falling down as rain is like, oh, Krishna, Chaitanya, it's quite a bit coming down, because rain doesn't come in one drop at a time. So that was a nice realization, Mother Gita. Thank you for sharing. Any other sharing from devotees? Any takeaways? Any reflection from this really powerful reading? Actually, let me just see if there's any hands up or jumping in. One point that I really liked as you were reading this particular verse, on Maharaj Bharat, and I've said that to you a couple of times the past couple of weeks, that it reminds me of my god sister, my senior god sister, that Prakshit one time mentioned in one of the classes, how when she was living in a temporary rehab nursing home, and she would chant outside and she would look at the ducks, and one day she didn't see the ducks, and then she realized that she was thinking about the ducks when she was chanting, and she goes, oh my god, what am I thinking while I'm chanting? But that was a very good reminder, because as you're reading that, it was reminding me how much we should always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna, and find activities or be in an environment where we are always being reminded of the Lord, because death can come at any time. And that was definitely, yeah.
And God sister, senior God sister, was actually thinking, he was up there in the, she was up there in the age at that time too. So she knew that death couldn't possibly be that far away. So when that morning she didn't see the ducks, and said, "Oh, but where are the ducks?" And he says, "What, you want to be a duck your next life?" Thinking about that, because she was well aware of what a person thinks. Now let me just put something this way, because this was Srila Prabhupada says, of course, one's thoughts during the course of one's life accumulate to influence one's thought at the moment of death. So I asked my Guru Maharaj, Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, it was a question that wasn't directly related to but as he was answering it, this is a one-on-one when we were staying with him. He said that at the time of death, your predominant thoughts are the ones that you most likely going to think of at the time. Maharaj Bharat was thinking about the deer day and night. He stopped his devotional service, and he was every time, connecting his mind and body and everything to the deer and the deer's welfare. And so he died thinking about the deer, because the deer was there. And so he accumulated his consciousness, the thoughts on the deer instead. And that's what dominated. And so when we think about Krishna by chanting his holy name and serving Krishna, then the more we think about it, then we flood our minds with Krishna consciousness, service, and the more menial, that shows humility. The more willing we are to do menial service, that also shows the extent to which we stoop low to serve Krishna. It very much helps our consciousness, and you will see Krishna always reciprocates. You will see in your life one way or the other, the more that you give your heart to Krishna in service. But chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is very, very, very important. Therefore, if you're not doing it, you should be doing it. And if you're doing it, you should increase the quality of it and definitely the quantity if you can. Concentrate on chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra so the mind doesn't roam somewhere. There's a Papa disciple that says, the mind sometimes, don't let Krishna conscious, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra be background music. That is, you're thinking of something else, and then you're chanting the Hare Krishna Mantra, but you're not concentrating on the words. They should be concentrated upon with as much effort. Train the mind. So Papa said the mind roams, but you train it. Keep bringing it back, and then it will concentrate on chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And if that gets done a lot every day by thinking about Krishna, then the time comes for body to quit and soul to come out, the mind will still be thinking about Krishna. And if you think about Krishna, that state you attain without fail, Krishna says, state of being. So think about Krishna, you go to Krishna. Krishna's abode. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for speaking and sharing more light on that point, because it's really nice that these few verses have been more on the mind, I think, and how I think at least for my takeaway was so much on how to train the mind on chanting of the holy name and how to train the mind to engage in devotional service, how to train the mind to be in an environment where we're always reminded of the Lord. That way, at the time of death, because we know that death will come at any point, that, you know, we are reminded of the Lord, you know, even at the time of death. And in fact, as you were reading, I was remembering devotees that I've known, you know, who have left their body, and how every time it comes to that, you know, the last few days or hours or, you know, minutes, we always make sure that there are devotees around chanting louder and louder and louder. You know, I was remembering Mother Lalamrita, Mother Kalini. I mean, of course, our spiritual master Bhaktitirtha Swami, you know, Mother Dvani, so many devotees. Like, we always make it a point to really chant really, really loud. Yes, Mother Gita, please, Mother.
Yeah, this reminds me of a promise my sister and I have made to each other, that if I'm at deathbed, she would come and chant very loudly, and likewise, you know, so to help each other.
That is a beautiful promise, Mother. You're so fortunate. So fortunate. Yeah, we have to, you know, really chant. And it's Mother, as you were speaking and sharing this beautiful promise that you and your sister made, I was remembering my spiritual master when it was very close. I think it was the last half hour of his life on the planet. And I remember, you know, there was a couple of devotee doctors and nurses, and they were, you know, they have a way of telling how much, you know, more time is left, you know, of the body. And the closer they were saying it's any time now, or, you know, whatever, the louder. I remember we were chanting so loud, like at the point of, you know, tears, you know, but still in a joyous, it was a mixture of joy and sorrow, but very loud. And the whole house was like Vaikuntha. I remember that. And that's what came to my mind as you were speaking, Mother Gita, about your promise that you and sister made to chant very loud. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, we also promised that we'll take the ashes to the Yamuna in Vrindavan. So
Wow, you made some powerful promises, Mother. You're inspiring me. Thank you so much, Mother. Thank you for sharing those beautiful, you know, promises that, you know, that will help us to remember the Lord. I think is what I am getting a takeaway, you know, from your comment. So thank you so much.
And my takeaway is that you and your sister love each other very much.
Yes.
That's obvious.
Yes, actually, the spiritual family is much, much closer than the material family. So
oh yeah,
we've met so many devotees we've met, and they've all become a part of family, you know, real family.
yes, wonderful. And that's the way it should be. That's the way it should be.
That's the community building. Yes, thank you.
Said it also. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, very nice. Any ways from devotees, any thoughts, any reflections, any add-ons, clarification, any questions too, you know, please do jump right in before we end and share your thoughts. And just a humble reminder that we have our normal Sunday program this Sunday, 4:30. So we encourage devotees to please do join us on this Memorial Day weekend at the temple this Sunday. And if there are no questions, no comments, we look forward to seeing you all on Sunday and our Monday morning Bhagavatam class, which is, we just got into chapter 11 of Canto 1. You know, just touching the tips of it, you know, so please do join us. It's a beautiful, beautiful discussion, beautiful reading by Srila Prabhupada. So join us. Until then, Vanchakrapatubhyascha, Kripasindavevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you so much for joining us, devotees. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mother Gita.
Hare Krishna, Pavana.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Pavana.
Very happy to see you, Prabhu.
I'm glad you joined. Nice to have you on.
Yeah, I'm planning to join all 3 days if possible.
Please, would love to have your association, Prabhu. Hariva.
Association is what I need. Thank you.
We all need it.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
Yes.
I had heard from the devotees in reference to remembrance at the end of the life that the price you pay to get a birth as a deer or a dog at the end of the life is remembrance of a deer or a dog. At the same price you can get Krishna. So Krishna has made that so cheap that, and he's so merciful that for devotees, he says, you just have to remember me and you'll come to me.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Thanks for the addition.
Yeah, just remember me. So simple, right? And then, but then we make it so complicated. But it's so simple. Yeah, really, really. That's when he's on clearance sale.
Yeah, total. That's
time
why
of
we
death.
need devotees to come remind us at the end.
Yeah.
That's why we need community.
Yeah. Yes. Community. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for sharing, Prabhu. Very nice.
Hare Krishna.
Have a wonderful weekend. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.